coming on.
Okay, you're muted right now.
Oh yeah? I thought it says. Let's see why it's not working. It was working a moment ago.
All right. Yeah. Light's not coming on or anything. You used your camera though, right?
I did. Here, let me see. From your Google Hangouts.
Make sure your Zoom is off, that you don't have that Zoom still running. That's
the problem.
You can't have that.
Okay.
Now try to go back to that.
Now let's try. Yay.
So get that turned around somehow. Face the board.
Okay.
We're waiting.
It's really annoying. Let's try again.
GPS tree.
Let me know if you can hear that.
It's okay.
I trust them so. Like a maiden.
But
That's just sitting back there.
So Tyler, are you a participant this time around?
I'll get up, kick it off, but waiting for the, who's going to handle all the officiating stuff here. Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
UBS, coming up on maybe 10, 11 months. Well, not even that much. It'll be a year. Before then, I was a VA slash.
So what we do is either at the beginning or at the you can say you're looking at interested in an application and I'll poke that out and then I just say, hit you up with after the meeting if they want to talk about it.
To hire someone.
Okay.
Yeah, just to chat.
I met Tommy.
Damn. There you go.
He actually
Add that up there and I'll call.
consultant who knew that he was at a previous company before you. So he was doing all the screening, interviews. Working for the company.
You might need to scrub some chairs.
Yeah. Yeah. Some.
All right. Just real quick, we'll start the conversation here in about 10 minutes. Food's in the back. If you're looking for drinks, they're in the back in the refrigerator here in the back corner. And we're going to start here in about 10 minutes.
Where are you at?
UBS.
So, UBS getting on the blockchain yet?
What?
On the blockchain. So you've heard of Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is an implementation of a blockchain app, actually. And right now the banks are absolutely doing this all, thinking of ways to implement blockchain for distributed, for basically distributed and because it's a game changer in terms of being able to.
Right. Tweet?
Yeah.
I don't know what happened, but it's not on anymore.
It is? It's still showing them. It's still on your screen.
Hold on.
There you go. Okay. I don't know if you touched something or what happened.
Look at you.
Stop touching stuff, Tweet.
Stop touching. You might go to sleep.
Hopefully it doesn't. Because I think it helps if you can kind of see where you are
Yeah.
on the screen. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. This is a great crowd. This is awesome. How many people, this is your first time being here? Nice. All right. So those of you just coming in, we have chairs, stacks of chairs around. You can grab some chairs. There's some more over here if we want to line up that way as well. We have run out of food, unfortunately. I don't have any more pizza. We do have drinks back here. There's also big boxes of alcohol back there. That might help. That's right. That's what you get instead of food. Instead of food, you have vodka. So welcome to the Agile user group. We are also live streaming right now. We are trying an experiment to see how this goes. There is a nice little minute delay, so I'm speaking to all of you from the future. So in a second, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to man the chat room, but there'll be a little bit of delay of people coming in there. But we're going to see how this goes. I got a lot of suggestions about trying to do something new because people on the phone either couldn't hear people asking questions, stuff like that. There was a lot of suggestions, but I don't want to minimize this group. I don't want to make you come up and grab a microphone or anything like that. So we're going to try some things, but understand those of you on the line, if this doesn't work, come to the group because it works great when you're here. All right. So if you haven't been here before, let's go over kind of the logistics. This is a facilitated discussion. This is not a presentation. So we're going to start talking about user stories. Wendell Patton's going to be our facilitator today, a Scrum coach out of UBS. And this is our meeting. So it goes where we want to. And we're going to rely on your input, your questions to kind of lead us how we go. We'll write and kind of try to keep a little visual dialogue going up here, and then we'll take pictures of this and post it on the site as well. If you haven't been to agilenashville.com, please go there and sign up for our meetup group. That's where you'll get all the meeting notices and et cetera, et cetera. We also have @AgileNashville as our Twitter handle, and then we have Agile Nashville LinkedIn group. Those are the three primary ways we will communicate. So if you're wanting to know about any events coming up or anything like that, that's where you need to be watching. Also, a call for volunteers. So we are planning to expand the group in 2016 in a couple of different ways. We are Cynthia? No, Cynthia can make it. We have somebody who's going to start taking over doing night meetings. So we had been doing the PMI Nashville has a COP chapter where Mr. Kane has taken that over. But we also want to have our own meetings so that hopefully we can do that in a cadence where there'll be plenty of nighttime options for coming and actually hearing a presentation, and we'll have a mixture of, we'll try to bring in some big name speakers from around the region and also local speakers to kind of hear what's going on in our neck of the woods. So there can always be help with that. So we will post something up in the site with information about how you can participate in those. And once those get kicked off, we'll announce them on the site. Also, the first Music City Agile conference will be this year. Anybody go to Music City Code last year? Handful of people. So yeah, well, you started, so you should be the guy. So Mr. Gaines is the one who runs Music City Code, and we talked about having a sister conference. So what we're looking at right now is the day before Music City Code starts, we're going to have a one-day dedicated Agile, and then there'll be a day in between our conferences that will have a workshop day, and that might be like full-day things where you can go and we might have user story authoring things there. That's still kind of being sorted out. But all of that will be announced on our site. We'll have our website up pretty soon. There'll be a call for speakers and those type of things. We're still sorting out what pricing and all that kind of stuff is going to be. But it will be very similar to what Music City Code did last year, which was great. Music City Code is doubled in size. Quadrupled in size, that's right, because we have the workshop. So it'll be very interesting. So keep your ears for that. Yes.
If you want to volunteer, how do you contact?
I will put that up on the site. So we've just kind of set up the leadership for that, but we definitely always use some more volunteers for day of, and also for lots of activities leading up to that. Anybody here is trying to get your CSP or your CEC certification? Hours spent working with us go towards that. So that can help you too as well. Any other events coming up in the next couple of months? Agile-ish project management type events? No? Another thing we're thinking about doing, we haven't gotten this totally together, but sometime in the next couple of months, we're going to do an Agile game night. We did this some time ago, and it was very successful, where if you've ever done any of the certified Scrum training or things like that, you've done the pity batch game and all sorts of fun little exercises that help prove a point. We're hoping to do a night of a whole bunch of those together. We'll probably do the Kanban board game. We'll probably do the pity batch game and anything like that. So once we get that out, I'll put a call out for if you've got an interesting, fun one. We'd like to have a bunch of them going at the same time so you can kind of float around and experiment with a couple of different games. So that will be announced on the website as well. Another thing we're doing is people kept saying, is there any place where I can ask if anybody's looking for a job, or tell people that I'm looking for a job, or find people who are interested in things that I want to talk about? And so I'm going to start putting a little section over here on the whiteboard that you can come up with this stuff on. And I'll just point to them. So if you're looking for a job, and we've got Samuel, Michelle, and Joe. Where's Samuel? Where are you at? Where's Samuel? Michelle? There's Michelle right there. Joelle? Is that right? So if you're looking for a PM or a PMP or a CSPO or a BA, we've got to talk to those people. We've got some people looking for some BAs right here, so it might be a matchmaker right here. Qualifax is looking for 3 senior BAs. Who's my Qualifax person? There we go. Talk to Qualifax over here. Look at that. Also, want to chat about long-term planning. Alonzo, where are you? And you want specifically around kind of the entertainment business, right?
Preferably, but anybody that's into Agile and Scrum Master, yeah.
Okay, so that may just be, hey, people with like ideas, let's get together and talk about something specific kind of outside of the group. Any other announcements I'm missing? Anybody got something? All right, so let's bring up Wendell. Come on now. Wendell, I've worked with him at UBS, which is a very unique and interesting place.
Yes.
Doing lots of cool
Including
stuff.
Leeds. Yes.
And Wendell's Scrum coach out there, so I'm going to let Wendell take it away. Give him a round of applause.
It was funny because I was telling my wife like this weekend, I was like, hey, I have to facilitate a conversation, Monday. So, she's the type of person who's very, organized, cue cards and everything like that. So, she was looking at me crazy all weekend because I wasn't taking notes or anything. And I said, it's a discussion. That's all. It's just leading a discussion. So please help me be honest on that. I want to have a discussion with everybody in here instead of me just kind of spouting off what I think about user stories and the best way to do things. All right. So by show of hands, how many of you all use user stories on a day-to-day basis? Okay, cool. What is some of your biggest challenges when dealing with user stories? Anybody?
Too darn big.
Too big.
Brevity.
Too big. What else? Excuse me?
I said it's the same thing, brevity.
Too big?
Too vague.
Too
One of my
vague.
challenges is getting them to define what done looks like.
Challenge to figure out what done is.
Yeah.
Technical versus functional. Anything else?
Dependencies?
Dependency.
Solutioning the story. Like how.
Okay. Anything else?
Not everybody wants the same language. Not everybody wants the same language. Terminology.
Like different knowledge about what a user story is and what it's used for.
They don't use the same language. The wording as you have written there, so they can get along without it.
User story versus job stories.
Something like that. Doesn't matter.
Well, I heard someone else.
Getting worked up about the right wording format.
Right wording. Yeah, I've seen some people spend like 10, 15 minutes just trying to get the wording down on one user story. Like half the meeting is gone. Anything else?
Not clear enough about the type of user.
I didn't hear you.
Enough information about the type of user.
Not enough information about like the end user. I heard something about story points.
I was at this point, yeah.
Okay.
This is between a story and a task.
Stories versus outs, right? You said stories versus tasks? I think we have enough. Not sure if we'll be able to address all of these. All right. So for me, a rule of thumb is I like to, with a user story, it's like a preview to a movie, right? I like, have you ever been watching TV and a commercial comes on and a preview for a movie comes on and it's what, 30 seconds? And at the end of the preview, you're like, I don't even know what the movie's about, let alone am I going to go pay, $10 to go see it? So you want just enough for anybody to be able to kind of look at the user story, know what direction that you're going in, but not too much detail where you're trying to explain everything out, right? So I think the filler, like the end goal of the user story, is the acceptance criteria, right? So you have this overarching sentence that says, hey, as a user or as whoever, I want something to happen, for this reason. And then the filler is, well, how am I going to test that? How am I going to accept that, right? And I think when you add those two together, then you have a full picture, right? So again, you want to break things down into chunks. So let's attack this too big. So like, I guess a story versus an epic. All right, does anybody use epics? Okay. So anybody, give me your opinion on what the difference is between a story and an epic.
Epic is going to last for months.
So you gauge epic on time, right?
Yeah.
All right. Some people gauge it on they gauge it on complexity, right?
If it's spread across releases, then you would have an epic.
It'll spread across multiple sprints.
Multiple sprints.
Right?
I think of an epic as something I would present to manager.
Okay. Right. So basically, something is super high level, but it's enough to understand, hey, this is what we're going to be working on for the next several months or the next year, right? Okay. So the big thing that I've seen about stories being too big, right? You want to be able to break a story down into tasks, right? And your task you need to be able to close those tasks out within a relatively short period of time. 24 hours, 48 hours. Rule of thumb I like to use is like that task needs to be no more than 1 working day or 2 working days, right? So if you're dealing with a story and you can't break it down into that piece, if you can't break it down into, let's say a work week is 5 working days, if you can't break that down into this story will be complete by the end of the working week, you may need to readdress it and break it up.
When you say 1 to 2 working days, do you use testing when you think about it that way, or do you just have to do that?
That's just that.
Well, let's turn around and ask that question.
But it doesn't have to be just a dev, right? So is that just a dev for you in the way that you run it? Because some people, so I've seen some teams, everything is included in that user story. Dev, testing, it just depends on how you're working.
That's how we work. It's basically a story that you start decomposing it into task, and before that task is complete, it's going through QA testing and all of that. And any blocker issues are resolved before that task is being considered done.
Okay.
Yeah, I think traditionally you're gonna have a hard time calling it a story if you can't get to done, your definition of done, which is awkward if it's not potentially shippable at the end of that time, right?
Right.
So ours includes everything it takes to get it potentially shippable.
Okay. So you're gauging it based on the end product. So if we can't do this story within a sprint and have it fully tested out, ready to ship out the door, then it's too big, right? That's a good rule of thumb. Anybody else?
Question about ethics. Just curious. We have this notion of a definition of done for a user story. Is there a definition, a corollary for ethics, or is that just when you finish all the user stories associated with that?
I would say, I mean, it'll be difficult to do a definition of done on the epic, right? Because it's so big and it's going over a span of time. And during that process, you might have to add more user stories to it. So I would say that, that your epic definition of done is based on the user stories being done. Because you might start out with 50 user stories to get that epic done, but by the time you're done, it took 100 user stories to get it done. You can break things down enough on the front end and things of that nature. Does that make sense? Did that answer your question?
The definition of done is common to a complete project. Doesn't change with the epic or
It can. I think a lot of times when we're talking about agile software development, I think we try to put it in a box, right? We try to say it needs to be this. We need to do this ceremony. We need to have our daily stand-ups. We need to do our retros and things of that nature. And these things are true. These things are great guidelines. But I think some people get so caught up in that guideline that it sometimes inhibits some teams. There are some highly functional agile teams that don't do all of the ceremonies, right? So your definition of done can definitely change per the project, right? So if it's something that you've never done before, right, it's completely green, like you've never done it before, you have no idea what's going to happen, your definition of done might have to change, right? Can you really truly have it tested out at the end of the sprint, ready to ship out the door if you have no idea what it looks like? It might take you a few sprints, and then you revisit your definition of done. Right now, my team, we're doing some things is very new to us because we're all pretty new to the company. So our definition of done right now is that we've got it fully developed, we tested it out, and if there is a bug that needs to be resolved, that has been tracked as a bug item and it's in the backlog. Now, our goal as we go forward is to be able to test it out, fix the bugs, and be fully shippable. But we're just not there yet. So it depends on the stage you are as a team, it depends on the project that you're working on, and there's an ebb and flow to it. It changes. Anything else?
And Wendell, will you repeat questions just for people online?
Sure.
So I'd like to go back to the when do you close out an epic. One technique that I've seen used pretty effectively is you've created an epic, you've got 50, 75, 100 stories inside of it, and then the product owner is coming back and saying, okay, we'd like to do this. One technique that we've used pretty successfully is if you've gotten 80, 85, 90% of the features that the product owner wants out of it, and more stories are coming in. If you look at how much time it would take to do this, then that product owner would say, you know what, adding any more features to this really doesn't add value for the end customer versus how much time we're going to spend on it. So let's just consider this to be closed and start a new one for something that's going to replace that particular product.
Right, definitely. Or ideally, to kind of piggyback on that, what if, you know, starting to add more user stories is changing the scope of what you initially had set out, right? Like if you have a clear vision going in about what you're trying to do over the course of the next 6 months, 8 months, and so on and so forth, you start getting to a point where you're adding stuff. You're like, this has nothing to do with what this epic was intended for. So maybe we need to revisit that and break that out.
That's where having a good vision of what that product is supposed to be, and also comparing all the stories and tasks to what that vision is supposed to be. If the story doesn't fit what that vision is, then why are you even including that in?
Exactly. Anything else on too big before we move on to the next thing?
We're doing MVPs.
Mm-hmm.
We're done. We know the project's this big. We want to put something in the hands of the users after 2 or 3 sprints. We define done as this. Doesn't have all the security features, but let's do 50, 60% of the end product.
Right. MVP. How many people do an MVP? Good. Good. What's your experience with it? Positive, negative? I tried to pitch it at my business, at my company, and they laughed at me. They're like, no, we want it all. There's no minimum.
I think we struggle with consensus on what is truly the minimum viable product.
Right.
That's where I've seen it work extremely well when there's consensus on this is the minimum. But if you don't get consensus going in, we see loops and loops of too big,
Right.
too long, sprints too long. And so it really comes down to the solid, clear vision and consensus among stakeholders and the development team and anybody testing it. This is what minimum means. Understanding all these things are great, but this is what minimum
Right.
means.
Right. It's clearly defined.
So I was going to add to the Bible, it's not necessarily Bible for everyone. Let's just get something out there. We shipped stuff that didn't even have a login, but had basic functionality, so that way the users could actually validate the functionality. And then we tack login systems on the front end to make sure that we've got per user access and stuff like that. But they already know the functionality works. So I don't know that minimum viable is always exactly what we're looking for. We're looking for incremental shipping, incremental.
Right.
So kind of in line with that, part of this is getting things out quickly so we can realize revenue, but part of it is to get information back, feedback loop, and information. As long as we get something, like you said, let's put something out there, either alpha clients or just internally or something that may not be gold and we're getting money from it, but we can get information about it and go, that was a dumb idea, we should never done it. And that's the other thing with too big is understanding when to let something go, when to know your baby's ugly. And
multiple soft releases to lead up to the MVP. That's the way you go. As you release something, you continuously release, keep releasing the
Right.
product part of the business.
Yeah, definitely. So you're saying basically, you're doing releases pretty quickly and pretty often. So MVP is just going to happen, right? It's just going to happen organically, right?
No, I'm working at 2 different companies, and the company that didn't do continuous integration, that had larger releases every 2 to 4 months, they had an easier time with MVP because when something shipped at the end of 2 months, then they needed to evaluate all those little loose pieces. Was that more important than the next big feature they were trying to release? But the continuous integration cycle that I've seen as well, where they release every single week. Well, it's just 1 more week. Well, let's just go ahead and give it to them. Well, let's just go ahead. And so then the projects just get elongated because every single week, and they just can't let it go because they don't. next thing isn't more important than waiting 2 weeks on these reviews.
Right.
So for us, I think the MVP has been very valuable as an internal conversation. And to your point, we gotta face the fact that it's not such a concrete thing, right? It's a concept and it's a talking point internally. And the problem that I've seen is that we didn't really talk well enough to our customers. And our customers, when I say customers, I mean our end customers, our external validation teams and people like that, because I often hear them say, especially the EP team, say, I don't think viable means what you think it means. Because you're leaving the viable out, but I don't think we communicated to them that it's good enough to get feedback, not good enough to sell. And so I think the conversation is more valuable than pretending like we got that defined real well, right? It's a good conversation to have, otherwise you don't really limit what you build effectively, or some kind of conversation like that.
Right. And I also see, like, oftentimes, like, even though we start talking about, agile development and we want to be flexible, we want to kind of go with the ebb and flow of everything, we try to say something like MVP and then we try to set it in stone as if that can't change. Like, that can change. Like, anything can change it, but it's all about being transparent up front, having those conversations early instead of late, and then making sure everybody's clear as far as, like, marching forward, right?
So what I've done in the past is see the workflow for MVP, work really well. Use must have, right? Must, could, must, should, could, and won't do that. And then when you've got all your must, right there, you have at least it's going to be either that or part of that. So
right.
Your MVP, as long as really when you work in this collaboration with the stakeholders and working with them, and then roadmap, right?
Right.
And putting it out on a 6 to 9 month roadmap and putting those places. And here's our first release, and so forth. What I've found is a lot of times, the majority of times, in fact, they don't want what, because once they started using it, just as Tommy said, they decide that they don't want the features that maybe they thought they wanted initially.
Right.
So you have a true MVP, everybody's happy, everybody's having fun, and you get things done.
Right. So just kind of break it up into what we must have, what we could have, and what, must have. Let's say you must.
How does that work if you don't have to make requirements up front?
Well,
if those aren't defined.
So this is a point that when you define your requirements, right? You've got your user stories, right? I think that's really just saying, is this a must? Is this about each one, that conversation?
M-O-S-C-O.
Yeah, MOS, no, should comes before.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
I don't mess you up. Must, should, and must, should.
But, and the big thing in Moscow or anything you use, I mean, it's all it is a range.
MSCW. All right.
The other thing I remember about prioritizing is something like finite, with a static representation like Moscow or something like that, you have to do it over and over again. You can't just do it once.
Like over the whole thing.
That's right. Yeah, we used to force them to go and do that for a backlog every sprint. Every sprint we reassess.
That's what we do. We ignore that. All right. I kind of butchered that. Sorry. So too big. All right, too vague. I get that. I get people, especially from the business, right? Like, you show them a user story, like, what the heck is this? Like, especially like a product owner, somebody who's standing in as a product owner, and they're not too familiar with agile development. And they say, you feed them a sentence that looks like this, and they're like, what does that mean? So what do you think the best ways to combat user stories that are too vague are? Should come out in the retro. Usually, in my experience, like, the team is clear on what they need to do. Like, it's usually speaking outside of the team when people are talking about too vague. Or I think that a lot of people, they'll do the user story, and it's kind of pretty high level, but then they skip out on the acceptance criteria. right? Like, what makes this true? Like, what are we going to test on? So I have teams. I have 5 developers on the team and 2 testers, and I had to kind of walk them through the process because we would do a user story, and then the testers would get to the point where development was done, and the testers were like, "What do I test on? I don't know, what's finished, or how do I test this?" So to me, the acceptance criteria kind of fills in all those blanks.
We use a tool that helps with that because just giving a story doesn't always.
Right.
So not only are we at the value statement that the business has approved, the value of that story, we also have a section of business rules. A lot of times that's in the business details because otherwise they're not, even if you really spell out the acceptance criteria, sometimes they get it, but it's something for business rules. It's not exactly that. Acceptance criteria is some rules that you
Right.
dive down deeper into that.
Right. And you say you use a tool. Is it a specific software tool? Rational.
Once you start getting into a lot of the required things of stores, right? You say, hey, you want an alternate, you want business rules, you want this thing. I struggle with that because I think as a story always need everything that you're putting in. You have like 10 categories or something, you may not in that case. But I've seen folks right in struggle.
So an example we had on one of our teams is the product owner just chatted with the CEO. The CEO said fixed membership. So the product owner comes into the planning meeting that day and says, story, fixed membership. No idea what it means, but can the team say no to the product owner? Did they reject it?
Yeah.
No,
Absolutely.
the team said no.
Emphatically, as you heard from Agile, they're going to say yes. The team can say no, but it's a no with we need to clarify it.
But
right?
Isn't that the too vague? It's too vague.
Doesn't mean
it means it's too vague for the team to estimate. It's too vague for the team to execute. And the team should be empowered to only pull in things that they can do. Yeah. And so if it's too vague, I can't do that. I can't commit to it. So you gotta have that gate that the team says, I don't know how to even start to estimate that or build that, so I can't do it. If you don't have that, you have a bigger problem.
So we do that in our planning poker, actually. We have the question mark and the infinite card. And so if the story can't be, one of the thought leaders that our team's particularly kind of glommed onto is my tone, and it's, look, your story is a note for you to have a conversation with the business. It's all about daily conversations. So no, we're not going to list out every single business rule and every requirement in this one story. It's going to say, in plain English, I need this to do this so that this. And that may not be that format, but what we do in planning, if it's too vague, is, one of your cards is a question mark. So if you want me to estimate this, then I want you to tell me in plain English what this needs to do.
Right.
And that's the holding each other accountable piece of the team.
Right.
I like to write that up there because that's an important aspect for me. No conversation is had. So if they put a user story and the team's supposed to estimate and go execute, there's no conversation. I think that's a key sign that that's probably my stories.
One thing that we do, we do pre-sprint planning a few days before the next time we sprint. So we would have the product manager in the meetings with a few of the team members. So we won't have vague stories coming to being able to be played in the sprint. So I'm not going to wait till the sprint to look at it and go, oh, there's not enough information here. I want to address that before we get into the sprint.
Right. And some teams like address that as like a definition of ready.
Yeah.
You know, like this is not even ready to go into the sprint because there's too many questions.
If you don't know what you're building, you don't know how you're testing it, and it just says fixed membership, okay. Then clearly you can't break that down into tasks.
Right. And I think the biggest thing about Agile that a lot of companies unfortunately don't get is that everything in here, whether it's a user story, whether it's planning, whether it's product, all this is an invitation to have a conversation, an invitation to interact with the business who needs something and with people who are doing the development. You know, a lot of times business say, go off in your cave and develop. You know, no, like we need to know, we want to deliver the best value to you. And in order to do that, we have to have some conversations. We have to be honest with one another. And they have to be ongoing conversations. And this is not just one thing, we're going to revisit this. I've been.
No, in addition to that, I actually do recommend usually to my product owners, they add their assumptions into the list. Because that does provide some context around what they're expecting. Because a lot of times, it's in their head. It's like, oh, I assume as we're doing this, we're going to do these things, but you don't relay that. It doesn't always come up in conversation. So,
and you pointed this out earlier, is that conditions of acceptance is the woefully thing that people usually, they write that story, I ask this, I want this, that, but it's the conditions of acceptance are really the meat of the story. And I think that's where, that can really play out. Whether you use, giving win-thins or how to demo or something more than just a bulleted list of threat things you're shouting out, requirements, that's where you can have that discussion. And those are specific but not detailed. Not detailed that I need this box and it needs to be 20 pixels long. It's specific in that this is the thing I need to accomplish for the user. And I think if you have those conversations, that helps. But again, back to what you guys said, it's a conversation. It needs to be something that's ongoing all the time.
Right.
So just to add a follow-up. So CEO to product owner to team says no, it floats back up. Would the team then go on in their sprint planning meeting to do other stories, or would most people leave a gap for, we're going to try and do the story once we have more information?
Well, I would say it's not, in my opinion, it wouldn't just be a blanket no. They would come back with questions for the CEO or whoever to answer. And in the meantime, while they're waiting on that feedback, they would continue on with their work. Yeah. Right? And then once that feedback comes, if it's clear at that point, then they would add it into the backlog and then ask the product owner to tell them how important it is, because it may need to move up or move down.
Yeah, your CEO could say, fixed membership, and the product owner brings it to the sprint planning meeting. And the team says, there's not enough information here to estimate it. We don't know what the acceptance criteria is. Therefore, we're not going to accept it in the sprint backlog, so it stays in the product backlog until that criteria gets met.
Yep.
So the consensus is take that and move it to the next sprint instead of keeping it
future sprint, next sprint, until you get the answers that you need to bring that in and start working on it. It needs to go into the backlog.
Yeah, I mean, if the CEO has said that this is a stop everything, let's go, then generally speaking, what happens is you end up getting the answers within your sprint planning.
Right. Right.
But that's assuming that everybody can agree that all of the acceptance criteria are 100% understood and work, that it has to be ready to go.
And if we're using Kanban instead of Scrum, sprints, I mean, we have one of our teams is Kanban versus Scrum team, and we've got an analysis doing columns and an analysis done for our requirements. And so you can put it back at the top of the queue and get to it as the next thing that you pull in as soon as the requirements of the conditions of acceptance are clear for the team and pull in. So it can, depending on what Agile methodology you're using, you go sprint or top of the queue for Agile.
And as soon as you wait,
well, yeah. I just have a little bit, I have been in this similar kind of situation, so I hope we can relate to what you're saying. So the biggest thing is, I think, if the product owner's responsibility to really to understand what and why behind whatever, like for example, the CEO said, fixed membership. The product owner needs to know what are the expectations and why. Like, why we tell what business value or what ROI we're expecting on this particular feature or product. So I think, and if the product owner doesn't know that, then it becomes the product owner's responsibility to find out that information. So I think that what and why plays a really crucial role, because how is left to us, like this is from business analyst, development, testing, everything. But what and why really needs to come from business. What exactly they're trying to achieve and why are they trying to achieve? What value is it? So I think if we ask these two questions, that gives us a lot of information most of the time. And one thing that I generally do, like our stakeholders, I ask them to write down, or at least ask them like business objectives. Sometimes I just walk with them on the corridor and take the business objectives. What is it that they're trying to achieve? When you say fixed membership, what exactly they're trying to achieve with that? And that really helps. So once we have the business objectives and business requirements, then you have like a clear understanding exactly, and then how part can be designed. That's the solution part. How we're going to achieve this. I think that really helps. And the other thing I want to add on to that too big and too big, especially the product is UI-based software. I always like to start with the wireframe first because that gives like a clear picture to everyone. So whenever I use a story versus I do wireframe first, the wireframe is always like very easy for non-technical people to understand because it gives them like the screen, like the feeds, it tells them what exactly it's going to do. And you give them like the scenarios, what that screen is going to do, or the behavior of the screen. And then you build your user stories. That almost always works as far as saying. And I worked as a developer as well, so this approach has worked in real life rather than building the user stories first. So that takes that too big and too vague problem solved right there.
Well, I would caution on that because, a user story is about solving a problem, not necessarily UX. The UX is still solving that problem. It depends also how you do your UX. If you go in, I've seen too many product managers go in with their UI guys in a closed room and come out with pixel perfect Photoshop diagrams and say, here you go. That's not negotiable. Right. Even if you think it's negotiable, you've done it in a format that does not lend itself to think it's very negotiable. I think that needs to be done with the team to some extent. I think paper prototyping is the best way to go. Whiteboarding is informal. So when we're talking about too big, this is input information. Input information should be as vague, as informal as possible. The more formal you make it is, the harder, the more time you spend on it, the harder it is to change. Output documentation would be good. But I'm just using the UI to drive that is only one part of the tool. I wouldn't say it replaces the story. At least in my experience.
Yeah. I'm piggyback on that. Like I have a team, they're following that same issue. Like we were presented with a bunch of wireframes to go in and build out this website. So now everything is held to that standard, right? So during the development process, our developers are like, that doesn't even make any sense. That's not intuitive, and it takes way too much energy to get that done. And then we have to go back to the business and beg and plead for it to be different than the wireframe. So I have to.
But there's a fine line there. You get too many cooks in the kitchen, and then you get stuck in this analysis paralysis. And I've been in teams that have given everybody and the janitor a voice as to what the new launch should look like, and you go nowhere. You do need a strong. If you do that, I think you need a strong personality to drive decisions. Otherwise, you're stuck.
Yes.
Also, it depends on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to build product delivery teams that are going to be long-lasting and have a lot of in-depth information and fairly autonomous because they have that knowledge built in, you want to invest that time. If you're like, this is a short-lived project team and they're all contractors and I don't want to invest in them, then probably not. And also, probably pure Agile is not the way you want to go with that kind of team anyway. You will probably dictate more to them anyway. Right. So it also depends on what you're trying to get out.
I want to think about a thread that you had about acceptance criteria. I'm very religious about the as a blah, 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 but I don't always do the definition of done piece. I'm curious if others are subject to the same failing as well, or not.
We've had some product owners that don't well define acceptance criteria. It usually ends up, if you don't have good acceptance criteria, somebody's going to notice something, they'll follow a bug with it or several bugs, and then it comes back. If you've taken the time to define what that acceptance criteria is, then they would probably understand what the function was supposed to be, and it just helps with technical debt and everything else. That's what we've seen.
Right. There's a couple of hands in the back. Anybody? I saw a couple of hands.
I think it's worth noting here too. I know we're talking a lot about too vague, but the other end of the spectrum is too much detail. Yeah. I've been stuck in that whole well as a product owner, and just note here, it's really a continuum of the level of skill of your developers and your QA, and their knowledge of the product that they're one. If both of those are extremely high, super high quality people on a product that they know really, really well, they'll get away with less. They know it. But if they don't, or if you're working with people who are new to the product, then you do have to start to call people, give them when they do, and acceptance criteria, definitions down, all of that. So just understand there's always a team. That's why I say it really comes out to the team. I've heard somebody mention earlier that they, and we did the same thing, is use a flag, but let the team know when a story is acceptable to the board. That's the team's collective decision on when it's acceptable. The dev team, the QA, and the product owner are all happy with the details of the story, and only things. That's really the only requirement that you go on, and that's it. Right. Don't forget this is a.
I completely agree with that. I think you have to be very sensitive when you're defining done to the level of talent that you have on the team, and that's going to be different in every team that's put together. It depends on whether your company's keeping your teams together across projects, or it's one big resource pool, and we're pulling in what resource we need for each project. That's why I think what I've seen be very successful is the definition of done. It's done as part of the sprint zero planning or setup or however you want to look at your sprint zero. I happen to believe in a project conception up front, which happens after the business has already decided what they want, right? And then you have all those production of epics, and then you take the team, put them in a room, 2 weeks, 8 hours a day, add granularity, decompose, get the stories ready for sprint play. Right? And once you have that, you automatically get an MVP when you go back to leadership with $1.9 million budget when you set up to be 1.2. Well, they'll get you down to an MVP real quick. So I think a lot of this stuff, just my comment, listening to the excellent discussion today, is that you have to be, like the big man said, agile about everything. You can't be rigid about everything. And I think that things get defined. You have the structure in the sense that you're defining everything at a project level, but you're not defining it at a corporate enterprise level with all this rigidity in it that projects can't work around if they want to. Right.
Having a common vocabulary makes a lot of sense here. Establishing what exactly means what, because they should be across, they should be speaking the same language or same vocabulary of standards. That helps the developers, testers, as well as business to understand what they're talking about. That's the biggest reason for the knowledge or differences between what we say and what they understand. That's my point.
You know, I've seen the opposite of not having acceptance criteria, and it is I've seen teams say, well, that wasn't in your acceptance criteria. Okay, so now we're talking about contracts, right? And the one thing we can't get past, and we talked about it here before, it's difficult, but one of the 12 principles of the Agile Manifesto is that business people and developers will work together daily throughout the project. So that may be hard to do, right? But anytime you use something written down in place of that conversation, you're going to get the results that you probably ought to expect to get, which is, consternation. I want to clarify what I said before. I said the team would say no. I think the team, if you get a situation where the team says no, the team should say, man, we would love to. If that's the highest value, you think that's exactly what we really want to be doing, we don't know how to do it. I'm sorry. And so it's not just a no, right? It's not again, I want to go to the contract negotiation side. There may be a need for some of it. But what they're really saying is, I don't know how to. I don't want to work on something less valuable, but I don't know how to do that yet, right? So if they look at that condition of acceptance, say you didn't put that down, or I made it match condition of acceptance, so you got to accept it, I've got a problem with that.
Again, whatever you're trying to do. I consulted for a long time, so my first word is always it depends. You say it very long, so you can charge an hour for it. Well, if you work, how many people work for a company where you build a product that you sell? How many people are building internal systems? What works for some of you is not going to work for other people. It's a totally different kind of thing. And I think you can still be agile, but like, so when we work as a product company, Link is a product company. We're also software as a service, so it's also easy for us to get our product out. We just put it on the website. So, you know, we do small experiments. We also have a culture of experimentation and failure. So, you know, we will not get all our stories up in line. We will take a handful of stories and say, those are what's important. Let's do it. The smallest little thing we can do. And if something isn't working, we try to be quick to let it go. We want to build deep product teams. That's our core values, and that's what we want our process to bring in. If you're a big multinational corporation and you're building the warranty adjustment system for the Bob down 3 cubes down, they're probably not trying to build a lot of depth with you, and they're trying, the technique will be different. So I like when somebody said the team will tell you how much detail they need. And if you have a team that's working in that, they might actually demand more detail. Does it mean you're a little bit less agile? Sure, but that's the values and principles your company's trying to represent with how they're building products is different than somebody else. And I think that's, we write down a lot of techniques, but we have to take those with a grain of salt about, does this map to the values and principles that my leadership want to actually implement?
That goes to the point, having a conversation.
Yeah, I see like a lot of companies, you have like this clash. Like a lot of companies kind of do agile backwards, right? They want to lead, they want IT to lead the agile transformation. And unless IT is developing software that's developing revenue for the company, it's not necessarily a good idea to lead with IT. Because then the business guy's like, what is this? What is a user story? What is a sprint? I don't know what any of this is, and nobody has the same language. You kind of fall into this command and control. So as Tommy said, it's very important that all these things are just to open the door to let's have a conversation, let's talk, and let's discuss the best way to do this. Whether that's agile, it might not be agile, it might not be Scrum, it may be Kanban, it may be waterfall. I don't know, but let's talk about it. Let's think about what the project is and how we need to move forward to get things done.
Little said waterfall.
We got PM on the board. We got some PMP.
Well, I've said it before. I'd rather do good waterfall than bad agile any day.
At the end of the day, it's all about developing, something that's going to add value to the end user and to the end customer, regardless of how you get there. Right? So I think everybody can agree on that, whether you're agile as a waterfall or, I just need a job, wherever you're at, in your career. Any other questions or statements? I don't know. How am I doing on time?
Yeah, probably 10 minutes before we start wrapping up. So maybe find one of those things that everybody can agree on that let's talk about next for the next 10 minutes.
Which one? Dependencies.
Hands for dependencies.
Anybody? Hands for dependencies? Okay.
Depends.
All right. Dependencies.
Well, we didn't vote on anything else.
Does anybody have? Hey. I think we had enough, man. Does anybody want to go with something else other than dependencies? Technical versus functional. How many people want to talk about technical versus functional? Dependencies is winning out. Anything else? Anything else? Okay.
I like this, the how part.
The what?
Solutioning.
Solutioning. Anybody who wants to talk about solutioning?
Yes, ma'am.
Dependencies are winning out. So I guess we'll go with dependencies. All right. So for the people who said dependencies, what are the main issues that you run into when it comes to dependencies? Anybody?
But it's hard to write a user story that's discrete, that doesn't have dependencies. Yeah.
Right.
It's extremely difficult.
Right.
And it depends on, again, it depends on Tommy Norman. But there's definite cases where I'm writing a story and I'm like, okay, for this next story, I have to have that one already finished. I can't take them out of order on the development side.
Right.
How do you handle that? Because stories are supposed to be independent by definition. If you have the first one, but you can't test the second one until the first one is complete. Yeah, absolutely. Right.
Can we repeat that? So it also depends on, and testing is a very liberal word. So we could, I can unit test the crap out of anything. It doesn't necessarily mean I release it. We're talking functional testing, we're talking integration testing.
Right.
Yeah.
What's our definition of done?
What's your definition of done? And it might be different for that guy than it is for that guy than it is for that guy.
Yeah.
A lot of times with dependencies, the first thing I'll say is, are you slicing your stories the correct ones? Yep. If you look at your stories, how developers like to slice stories, UI, database, services, we slice this way. Common, we have to build all this stuff before we do anything. That will end to not having stories that can be done. But then BAs are just as bad because they say we need to get all of this done. All of login needs to be done, and all of user account management needs to be done. And your end user doesn't give a crap. He says I need to get from here to my solving my problem. So if you can slice your story with just a thin enough amount of functional parity and technical parity to do that. That's the problem we all struggle with. Because as a technical person, I want to build the best thing that I can. But the customer doesn't care. No customer comes and goes, man, look at that C# code. Look at that JavaScript. Let me pay you more money for that. So slicing is always usually the first place for me. But you're still, especially with any complexity or size, going to have some dependencies. And so it's, what do you do if I have sliced as thin as I can, I'm solving one problem, and I still have a couple of stories that are going to spread multiple sprints, and until all of those are done, I really don't have something done. Let's start with that premise. So, all right, I've sliced as thin as I can. I can't get them any smaller. I have 3 stories that until these are done, it doesn't make sense to deliver this, whatever deliver means. What do we do?
Inside of one sprint or across?
Let's say it's going to take multiple sprints. I got 3 stories, each the size of a sprint.
Too big.
They're too big?
And you're saying you sliced them as far as you feel like you can slice.
I think I can. Now, I would say yes. Whoever you think they're small enough, they can be smaller.
Start slicing against
Against the chief grader? A user story grader?
I mean, but now depending on the environment, right, and who you're talking to and how involved your product owner is and the business is, it's an understanding, right? It's an ongoing conversation. We feel like we've sliced this as thin as we can, but this is not going to be shippable for 2 sprints or 3 sprints or so on and so forth. I think it kind of goes back to us trying to put everything in this lockbox. We have to fit inside these guidelines, and we can't venture outside of that, right?
See, to me, it means that you're just not introducing code, that you're introducing defects into code base, right? I mean, if you can actually just put out code, whether or not it actually has any impact to the end user whatsoever, but you can actually increase your iteration, you are incrementally delivering what will eventually become deliverable value, then as far as I'm concerned, if you're not introducing defects, you're still doing a good day's work. And
I couldn't hear her at all.
Can you continue to deliver to QA until it gets to a point where it's shippable? It depends, right?
That'd be pretty big.
I've got a services team that likes to write messages, write events to topics, and they're filling up a topic queue, but there's nothing to pick them up yet. So you're still doing valuable work, but later, in a different story, you're going to pick up on that work and deliver something to the other end.
It's a delicate balance. We have something we call R0, which is release 0, which is just kind of some plumbing, just enough plumbing code to make sure we didn't break anything else.
Right.
And it really doesn't do anything. Now, I saw some teams take it to the extreme, and they said, and I'd see like 20 R0s because they want to build, like all the plumbing before we do it. So we have to. There's that delicate balance of what's the simplest thing that'll work,
right,
architecturally and UI and business-wise to solve the most important problem for my customers. Whatever that is, it's probably as small as we get. If it spans the sprint, it spans the sprint. As long as that's the exception rather than the rule, and we're still trying to get as short feedback loop as possible, that might be what you do.
That's right.
And if it doesn't work, well, then don't do that. It's experimentation. It fail. I've said this many times in this group before. If I sum up Agile, it's think big, work small, fail fast, and run quickly. As long as I can fail fast, now not constantly, That's not good. But if I can say, all right, well, we made this big thing and it delivered and it didn't work, you know, why not? Now, if you delivered and it did work, it's really hard to argue about that. Well, we went outside the sprint. Yeah, but we delivered, we got lots of money. And it's kind of what the reason is. So I don't know if we have a canned answer. It's again, it depends. What are you trying to do? You trying to just please your boss and get it out on time and on budget? Then maybe that's what you need to do.
Right. Right. Tom? Have we looked?
Yeah, we start.
All right. So, I mean, to sum it up, it depends, right? User stories, how you do your user story splitting. I mean, I think Agile provides a great framework to, you know, to get work done in an iterative and collaborative way. But just be wary of, you know, putting yourself in this box where you're not having those conversations and you're being too rigid. You know, you want to give yourself room to grow, room to experiment and things of that nature. So that's all I have. Does anybody else have any comments?
Well, I heard Tom speaking about release zero, sprint zero versus release zero. Sprint zero, I thought more of like fraud.
Two different things. Somebody else on the chat just said R0. R0 is something we made up. That's not like an official thing.
Okay.
You go find that out in the world. It was just a small, we were experimenting with a lot of new technology, and we didn't want to build a lot of stuff on top of it only to find that it didn't work. So a lot of times to put something out in kind of our new ecosystem, we would just put out the smallest little bit, like you were saying. We might just be writing messages to a queue, and the queue might go, yeah, I got that message.
Okay.
And the caveat is trying not to do too many of those. You might do some small experiments like that, but it's only enough to where I can then immediately follow it up with an actual valuable thing, whether it's a valuable thing that's technically going to save us money or a valuable thing that somebody's going to pay money for and actually use or whatever that is. That's the basic overview.
Cool. All right. So are these the books that we have to?
We're only giving two away.
Two books.
All right. So thanks, Wendell. All right. So you should have near you or somewhere near you. If you don't, I have some more up here. A survey. I don't think we have enough pins, so you might have to share pins. And here's some more surveys. So if you fill those out, a couple of good reasons to fill this out. One is you could possibly be chosen to win one of these great books we have up here. Also, if you fill out the what topics you would like to cover in the future, those are things I take and we put in a database and we see what gets the most mentions and when did we talk about it last. And that's what we schedule next time. So please fill those out. Also, if you have topics, you can also put them on the website discussions. We're talking about trying to use a site that we can put them on and everybody can upvote, because people said they might have a very specific topic that may not be repeated by other people, but once they saw it, they might vote on it. So we might use a site like TriSite or something like that coming up soon. So we're going to give two of these books away. I'm going to give you your option of which one you want. I've got scenario-focused engineering, which sounds a lot like what we were talking about today. I've got Agile Project Management with Kanban. I've got Agile IT Organization Design for Digital Transformation and Continuous Delivery. And then the Software Craftsmanship, Professionalism, Pragmatism, and Pride. So once we collect all those up, I will draw from those, and you can come up and choose which book you want. So while we're waiting for those to go up there, what are you going to go back and do differently tomorrow? Or today? What's your takeaways? Kick back your user story. It depends. That's right. Definition of done? Yes. What's that? Do we get PDUs? What's later? So can they get PDUs for this?
As a registered provider, and so
not for this one. The Agile COP stuff, you would. The stuff that Randy's going to start doing. I own it. Okay, there you go. Scrum Alliance does. Now Scrum Alliance, it depends. If you're talking PMI, no. We have more?
Anybody else feel filling out? All right. Also, so the feedback I was getting on the streaming is it was really hard to hear people. That's the common feedback we get, is that you can hear the speaker. We try to repeat things, but obviously this is not a question and answer, so it's not short stuff that's coming from it. I was trying to also type and summarize as we go along. We'll see how it goes. I don't think the extended experience is ever going to be perfect. It was a good first attempt. All right, so let me mix all this up. And Twee, I'm going to have you draw. All right. Pam Bergion? Yay! So I will also let you choose the next person. All right, here, we can pick the next one. There. Our next winner is Justin Meeks. There, Justin, here. Oh, there we go. All right, with that, thanks everybody for coming. Thanks so much. We'll take pictures of this, put on the board. I'll try to find links to some of the stuff we mentioned, post that as well. It'll be same bad time, same bad channel. Second Monday of every month.
So I was just happy to see you here. I saw you talking about things last year was about 5,000 kids. This year,
disguise big design up front. That's what happens. Like we did our view, which is good for so then, like my genius, sometimes we have magic. As simple as
yeah, that's what I figured. So I tried to actually use ours. I'm throwing out this.
What you doing? You're on step high.
That's where it's
Well, sort of. I'm a contractor for a company. So I have from there to
discovery. Oh, you never take articles dressed up like a little different. You know, I can dress up my dog. People are driving what message. A lot of times I'll go into like values. I'll say, all right, if you guys write down what values are, what are the values, what are the outcomes of the process? And then I'll say, all right, and show me how to do that. I want on time and I want on time. If you do that, you don't get a lot. I want to satisfy the customer too. All right, that's the 3 legs of school. You can't get all 3.
Good fashion cheap.
That's right. Let's go. Let's reduce. Let's slice down.
When you was in there,
There you go. Awesome. Thank you so much. Yes. So I got slapped. So send me a message on the meeting. Just send me a message. Yeah. Because I don't have your email. Because that's what I do. Okay. All right. If you do me a favor, just send me the link. But so I thought I can go get everybody and meet up this and let you get through. Like, so that's where I send everybody a message, but I need the emails to invite them. So that's why I just send it out. Yeah, well, and I'll be clear. I do not. I've got to try to think. Hopefully, I've got to get some volunteers together Brian, so Keith, how he is. I'll send you his. Because he's kind of Brian, I think is like he's probably an easier person. And he's also charged with this area. So the best intro to we're going to Seattle. Yeah, well, so we're going to put up. Right now, I just need to get so I was going to try to have a meeting, but I don't have everybody here. So what I'll try to do is get another evening thing. But try to just get another conference call. I'll send an email out with. I sent actually not going to summary. So you saw kind of the leadership role. Summary I sent you last week. I did that one a couple of times. So you, I guess that is. I'll make sure I get you in there. So I used to kind of say 39. What the basic roles. Some people want to sign up. I'll sit down and say, does this sound like something you see? So there may be in that email that I have a list of them, but I'm going to go expand that list to this is what and I'll send that out. I was going to try to do something after this, but let's try to get it. Give me a couple of days to kind of get this material together. I've got us Lincoln account. Here's the cards. I still have to get submitted to list for the sake of the additional language. I can't get the language back, so I have to call before I go out and start doing make sure I've got these things. They're like, no. Hopefully you enjoy it. No, it's not smart. It's that lips. The actual swing, where definitely used to be, because we can kind of piggyback off the music. They're going to have their companies like the day after, and they've already had their companies there, so we kind of just sharing a lot of resources.
So what do you do with someone like a programmer who says, I don't want to be HR, I want people to tell me what to do? Like what? Like he's an artist, right?
There's a lot of companies, they're very like infantile in the transition. So a lot of companies are doing it.
You're all dressed up.
Yeah, you're like a professional photo.
Yeah, you can't be wearing a suit. I'm looking for a guy in a suit. You know, where's the guy in a suit?
Yeah, and we do. So it is like clockwork every second Monday that we have it. I just sometimes I'm lazy about it.
It earned me.
Is there an attitude?
Coming out of my company.
My job is still asking to remove impediments.
Oh, you have to.
I'll tell you if something's wrong.
You can shut that off. Hey, Tweety.
Yeah.
You can shut that off.
I did?
Yeah.
That's still on.
No, you can shut it off.
Oh, shut it off now. Okay, okay.